Hey there. You know how it is, right? Every day it's like, bam, this is the next big thing. Bam. Got to worry about this now. Well, today we're hitting the pause button on all that. We're going deep on some big trends, the kind that could really shake things up globally. Gray elephants, they call them.
Gray elephants. I
Right.
loved it.
So picture this. It's pitch black, and there's this elephant, right? But nobody can really see the whole thing. One person's feeling the trunk, thinking it's a snake. Another one's got the tusk, thinks it's a spear, and so on. That's what we're trying to avoid. We're taking the full view using this report, The 7 Great Gray Elephants, put out by Tomorrow Today Consulting.
Okay, so what's the first elephant we're tackling?
Elephant number 1, angry people. And not just your everyday online ranting, I'm talking deep down global discontent, like when supply chains get messed up because of huge protests, companies hurting because of boycotts,
Yeah.
everyone feeling the pinch of crazy living costs. These aren't just news flashes, these are like warning tremors, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It feels like the ground is constantly shifting these days.
Exactly. So what's really behind all this global anger? And how can businesses even hope to deal with it when it feels like everything's so volatile? What's your take on all this?
It's wild, isn't it? This anger, a lot of times it comes from feeling ignored, like the system's broken and nobody's listening. Like way back with the suffragettes, their anger, they channeled it, made real changes happen. But these days, it's not just one single issue, right? It's like this pressure cooker of money worries, unfairness, feeling stuck, and then the internet just throws fuel on the fire.
And I'm guessing businesses can't just pretend it's not happening.
No way. There was a study by the Institute for Global Conflict Resolution. They found that if people are seriously unhappy with a company for a long time, that company's brand loyalty tanks by 15%, employee engagement drops 20%. That's going to hit you where it hurts.
So what's the play then? Keep your head down and pray it goes away. Doesn't seem like a winning strategy. Nope, not at all. Turn those potential enemies into your friends. Companies that actually tackle these big social issues head-on, they often end up ahead of the game. The World Economic Forum, they did a study, showed those companies that actively engaged, their brand loyalty actually went up 12%, and employee engagement up 8%.
Okay, so it's not just about weathering the storm, it's about understanding which way the wind's blowing and setting your sails right. Instead of being scared of the anger, you actually figure out where it's coming from and you could come out on top. Like turning a gray elephant into something that actually helps you along. Speaking of changing things up, our next gray elephant takes us from the streets straight into the population, aging populations.
Aging populations.
Right. Get
Yeah.
this. By 2030, that's not even that far off. People over 65, they'll outnumber kids under 10 for the first time ever. And I'm not just talking about wealthy countries. This is globally. Even China, a place we think of as bursting with young people, by 2050, their average age will be 50. Makes you wonder what happens when the whole world starts retiring at once, right? Yeah, that's going to be a big one to deal with.
For sure.
This demographic shift, it's massive. Think about it. Less people working, more pressure on healthcare, and those pension systems, they're going to be creaking under the weight of so many retirees. Like Japan, they're a prime example. They're already at a point where for every 4 people working, 1 person's over 65.
Yikes. That sounds like a one-way ticket to economic gridlock. Is there any upside to this aging elephant, or are we all doomed?
Hold on, don't hit that panic button just yet. There's a silver lining here. Literally. They call it the silver economy, and get this. By 2027, it's predicted to be a $28 trillion market. Older folks, they spend money too, especially on healthcare, wellness, travel, tech gadgets.
So instead of fearing the gray tsunami, it's more like riding the silver wave.
Exactly. Companies that figure out what this demographic needs and what they want, they stand to make a killing. Think AI robots helping with elderly care, telemedicine getting even better, wearable health trackers keeping seniors in tip-top shape. Technology is not just changing how we live, it's changing how we age.
It's crazy how technology keeps popping up in all of this. But what happens when that technology isn't just helping an aging population, but it's actually changing the planet we live on? That leads us to our next gray elephant, the angry planet. What are your thoughts?
Climate change. Big one.
We're way past thinking of it as some far-off threat. We're talking India getting slammed by heat waves that mess up their supply chains, coastal cities facing rising sea levels. That's people's homes, businesses, gone. And don't even get me started on those droughts in Kenya wiping out harvests. This is happening now,
Right.
and it's only going to get more intense.
Yeah, and the worst part is that it's not just one thing at a time anymore. It's like it's all happening at once.
Right, like that 2023 State of the Transition report. They called it a year of nonstop, once-in-a-century natural disasters. And let's not forget about those Canadian wildfires in 2022, worst they've ever had. Over 200,000 people had to evacuate their homes. It's like the planet is sending us a very clear message, and it's not a happy one.
Yeah.
So how can businesses step up? What can they actually do?
It's not even about IF businesses will be hit by this. It's how they're going to handle it. Look at what's already happening. Insurance companies in Florida, Texas, and California, they're flat out refusing to insure new buildings in those places against natural disasters. Clearly, this isn't just an environmental problem anymore. It's about whether your business can even survive.
Thinks you really stop and think.
Definitely. Bill Gates, he said it perfectly. It's great if we're not wasteful, but hoping the whole world goes back to living like it's the 1800s, that's not realistic and it's not fair either. We need individuals to take responsibility, but we also need big changes in the system itself. It's got to be both.
So what does that look like in real life? Is there any good news amidst all the doom and gloom? Are there businesses out there actually leading the way, showing what a sustainable future could look like?
Absolutely. There are some really cool solutions popping up. Like in Chile, they've got this massive solar plant, Cerro Dominador, powering over 200,000 homes. And Singapore, they're maximizing food production in the middle of the city with these awesome vertical farms. Oh, and there's this company, Avantium, they're making biodegradable plastics. These are just a few examples, but it shows we're on the right track.
It's good to know that even with all the problems, there are people out there finding ways to fix them. But figuring out those solutions within your own business in a globalized world, that's a whole other challenge, right? And that brings us to our next elephant. Multipolarity.
Multipolarity.
For decades, we've been in a world dominated by the West. But things are changing. Fast, new players are stepping onto the field, shaking things up, especially China. They become a major force globally, and they're rewriting the rules of the game. Think about it. Their economy is now bigger than all 27 EU countries combined. They're the top trading partner for over 120 countries, and they're leading the charge in important industries like 5G and battery tech. In fact, back in 2020, they were responsible for a whopping 63.2% of the world's battery cell production. It's a brand new world order, and it feels like the West might have missed the memo while this elephant was busy growing right under our noses. What are your thoughts?
This has been brewing for a while, actually. Back in 1999, the Russian prime minister at the time, Yevgeny Primakov, he was on his way to the U.S., but mid-flight, he told his pilot to turn the plane around. Why? He found out NATO had just bombed Serbia, which was a Russian ally. This move, they called it Primakov's Loop. It was a huge symbolic gesture, showing the world that Russia was forging its own path, not just following the West's lead. Primakov, his plan was to build a multipolar world, strengthening ties with China and India. And you know who was one of his aides at the time? Quietly paying attention? A young Vladimir Putin. And he's been working on this vision ever since.
So what's the move for businesses in this constantly shifting landscape? Do you pick a side? Is there even a way to navigate this new world without getting caught in the crossfire?
It's not about choosing sides. It's about understanding that the rules of the game have changed. Companies can't just rely on those old, familiar Western markets and partnerships anymore. Spreading your bets, diversifying, that's key. It means looking beyond those traditional markets, understanding these new power blocks like the BRICS nations, which are growing all the time, and learning how to work within them.
So it's about diversifying who you do business with, but is there something else, something a little less concrete, that needs diversifying too?
Absolutely. The world's a more diverse place in terms of who's calling the shots now. Cultural intelligence isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's essential if you want to do business globally without things blowing up in your face. It's understanding the little differences between cultures, how people communicate, how to build trust when you come from different worlds.
Can you give us some examples of businesses killing it in this new world order? Ones that aren't just surviving, but actually thriving in this multipolar environment.
For sure. Look at Alibaba. They strategically expanded into Africa, set up shop in Kenya and Nigeria, tapping into that booming e-commerce market. Another great one is Siemens, the German industrial powerhouse. They diversified their supply chains by partnering up with companies within the BRICS nations. Smart move, right? They get access to resources, talent, and they position themselves as major players in these developing markets.
It's incredible how these companies are not just adapting to a multipolar world, they're using it to their advantage. It just goes to show that embracing diversity, both in terms of geography and culture, can open up a world of opportunities for businesses and make them much more resilient in our increasingly interconnected world. But speaking of interconnectedness, our next gray elephant throws a spotlight on a massive issue affecting everyone, everywhere: inequality. And I'm not just talking about the income gap, although that's a huge part of it.
Right, it's much bigger than that.
Think about this. The 8 richest people on the planet, they have as much wealth as the poorest half of the entire global population, combined. That's insane. But it goes way beyond just money. It's about not having the same opportunities in life, whether it's education, healthcare, even just having a say in the decisions that affect your life. This is a global problem, and it's hitting businesses hard. The question is, how do they move beyond just acknowledging it? How do they actually be part of the solution? How do they help create a world that's fair for everyone, not just for those at the top?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer might be simpler than you think. It starts with a fundamental shift in mindset. Businesses, they need to stop obsessing over shareholder value and embrace a more holistic view, one that factors in the well-being of everyone involved: employees, customers, the community, even the environment. This is what they call stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism. Sounds like a radical departure from the traditional way of doing business. Can you break that down a bit? What does that actually look like, and why should businesses even care?
It boils down to this. Businesses, they don't exist in a bubble. They're part of a larger ecosystem, and they have a responsibility to make sure that ecosystem is healthy and thriving. It's not just about profits anymore. It's about having a purpose. It's about creating value for everyone involved, not just squeezing every last drop for a select few.
So it's about switching from a me mentality to a we mentality.
Yeah.
From taking everything you can to actually contributing, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing. There's a strong business case for stakeholder capitalism, too. Consumers, especially younger generations, they want to support businesses that share their values, businesses that are actively making the world a better place. And employees, they're more engaged, more productive when they feel valued, respected, when they believe in what their company stands for. Even investors are wising up, realizing that businesses with a strong social and environmental conscience, they're the ones that are going to win in the long run.
So it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about doing well by doing good. But how do you actually put stakeholder capitalism into practice? It's a nice idea, but how do you actually translate that into action? What can businesses do to tackle inequality and build a fairer world?
It starts by taking a good hard look in the mirror. Businesses need to ask themselves some tough questions. Are we paying our employees a living wage? Are we giving everyone equal opportunities to move up, regardless of their gender, race, or background? Have we created a workplace where everyone feels included, valued, respected?
Those are some tough questions to ask yourself. Sounds like tackling inequality requires companies to really examine their own practices and be willing to change. But it goes beyond just internal changes, right? Don't businesses also have a responsibility to address inequality in the world around them?
You're absolutely right. Businesses, they have a platform, and they can use that platform to advocate for policies that promote economic fairness, social mobility, give everyone a fair shot. This might mean supporting things like better access to education, affordable housing, job training programs. It's about making a real difference.
So it's about using their influence, their resources, to spark positive change that extends far beyond their own walls. It's about understanding that we're all in this together, that we all have a stake in each other's well-being.
Exactly. And it's not just about doing the right thing. It's about smart business. Businesses that prioritize equity and inclusion, they're not just building a better world, they're building stronger, more resilient businesses. They're building businesses that are built to last.
It's a powerful message, both for businesses and for the world. But let's shift gears a bit to an elephant that's already making its presence felt in a very real way: the big squeezes.
The big squeezes.
Yeah, imagine a business world wrestling with not just one problem, but a whole bunch at the same time. Scarce resources, prices skyrocketing, supply chains breaking down. And here's the kicker. This isn't some dystopian future. This is happening right now. It's like a perfect storm of global events hitting us all at once, and it's impacting every single part of the economy.
We're definitely feeling the squeeze.
Right. And to give you an idea of how widespread this is, a whopping 71% of companies across the globe say the cost of raw materials is a major concern. We're seeing a huge shift from offshoring, making things overseas to save money, back to nearshoring, where companies are trying to bring production closer to home to get a handle on those out-of-control supply chains.
Makes sense.
Right? Take manufacturing, for example. Remember when Ford had to stall production because they couldn't get enough semiconductors? Or how about retailers getting slammed with higher shipping costs, which just gets passed on to us, the consumers, in the form of higher prices and empty shelves at the store?
Yeah, those supply chain issues are a real pain. And it's not just frustrating, it's directly linked to inflation. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco did some research on this, and it's clear those disruptions in supply chain are a major driver of those price hikes we're all seeing.
It's a chain reaction, plain and simple, and everyone's feeling the effects. It's like that game of Jenga. You pull out one wrong block, the whole thing could come crashing down. But let's try to unpack the big squeezes one by one, make it a bit easier to digest.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start?
How about the one we all feel every time we go grocery shopping? The food squeeze. It seems kind of crazy, right? In a world with so much food, we're actually facing a shortage. How does that even work?
It's not necessarily that we don't have enough food. It's more about where that food is and what kind of food it is. We're drowning in a sea of junk food, high in fat, sugar, salt, which is causing a global health crisis, while healthy, nutritious food is out of reach for too many people around the world, either because they can't get it or can't afford it.
So we're drowning in junk food while people are going hungry for real nutritious options. That's messed up.
Exactly. And on top of that, we're wasting a ridiculous amount of food. The UN estimates that we throw away a staggering 1.6 billion tons of food every year. That's enough to feed a huge chunk of the world's hungry. It makes absolutely no sense.
1.6 billion tons. That's just mind-blowing. What can we even do about a problem that big?
You're right. It's a huge problem, and there's no easy fix. But there are things we can do, both as individuals and as a society. On a personal level, we can all be more mindful of the food choices we'll make. For example, we could all try to cut back on foods that require a lot of resources to produce and try our best to waste less food in our own homes. Every little bit helps.
So being smarter consumers and less wasteful in our own lives, that's a start. But what about on a larger scale? What can businesses and governments do to tackle a problem this massive?
Businesses have a huge role to play here. They can make their supply chains more efficient so less food is lost or wasted. They can invest in new ways to preserve food, and they can partner with organizations that take surplus food and get it to the people who need it most. Governments can implement policies that incentivize reducing waste, support sustainable agriculture practices, and make sure that food distribution networks, especially in developing countries, are up to par. It's a team effort, for sure.
It definitely sounds like it's going to take a multi-pronged approach, one that involves everyone working together and coming up with creative solutions. But the food squeeze is just one piece of this very complicated puzzle. We're also dealing with an energy squeeze, right?
You're right. And with everything going on in the world right now, it's a very relevant issue. Events like the war in Ukraine, the tension in Gaza, even those increased attacks by the Houthis on commercial ships in the Red Sea, they've all contributed to unstable oil and gas prices.
Tell me about it. We're all feeling it at the gas pump. It seems like we're constantly reminded of just how reliant we are on fossil fuels, both because of those price swings and the damage it's doing to the planet.
You're not wrong. This volatility we're seeing, it's actually fueling a pretty rapid shift towards green technology, which is good news. But this transition, it's not going to happen overnight. In the meantime, businesses and consumers both need to be prepared for more energy price fluctuations and start thinking about ways to become less reliant on fossil fuels.
So it's a balancing act, right? Meeting our current energy needs while we make the switch to a more sustainable future. But it's not just energy that's feeling the pressure. What about the freshwater squeeze? We don't hear as much about that one, but it could be the most critical squeeze of them all.
You're right. The freshwater squeeze often flies under the radar, but it's a crisis waiting to happen. The Himalayan glaciers, which are a crucial water source for billions of people, they're melting at an alarming rate.
That is scary. 40% of the world's population depend on those glaciers, and that region contributes a significant amount to the global economy, something like 20%. What happens when that water source dries up? It's almost impossible to imagine the impact.
Let's hope we never find out. If temperatures climb more than 2 degrees Celsius, we could lose 2/3 of those glaciers. We're talking about potential flooding, droughts, mass displacement of people. It's not a pretty picture.
Really makes you stop and think.
It does. And it's not just a problem for the Himalayas. We're already seeing parts of the Colorado River in the U.S. dry up. Water scarcity is a global crisis in the making, and it's closely tied to climate change and population growth, two challenges that we're already grappling with.
It's clear that these big squeezes, food, energy, water are some of the most pressing challenges we're facing today, both as a planet and as a business world. They're all connected, they're incredibly complex, and frankly, it's pretty overwhelming. Is there any light at the end of this tunnel? What can businesses do to navigate these choppy waters and actually come out stronger on the other side?
While these challenges are definitely significant, they also present some amazing opportunities for businesses to innovate and adapt. Instead of panicking, businesses need to become proactive, think ahead, and find ways to not just survive these squeezes, but use them to their advantage.
So what's the magic formula? What sets these resilient, forward-thinking businesses apart from the rest?
It all starts with a mindset shift, a we can figure this out kind of attitude. Businesses need to become incredibly resourceful, making the most of what they have, minimizing waste, and finding ways to do more with less. This might mean investing in new technologies that improve efficiency, rethinking their supply chains to rely less on scarce resources, or even redesigning their products and services to be more resource efficient.
So it's about doing more with less, becoming masters of efficiency. But how do they actually make that happen? What are some of the specific strategies they're using?
One big one is embracing technology and innovation. Digital solutions, particularly AI, machine learning, and blockchain, they have the potential to revolutionize how businesses operate and how they engage with their customers. These technologies can help optimize supply chains, predict disruptions before they happen, and create businesses that are much more agile and responsive to change.
So it's about using technology to create businesses that are more efficient, more resilient, more adaptable. But what about the human element in all of this? Are we talking about replacing people with robots in this quest for efficiency?
Not at all. It's not about replacing humans. It's about making them even better at what they do. The future of work is going to be all about collaboration between humans and machines, each playing to their strengths to achieve common goals. This means we need to focus on upskilling and reskilling the workforce, making sure employees have the digital literacy and critical thinking skills they need to thrive in this new world.
So it's about investing in people as much as we invest in technology, right?
Exactly. And what about the actual physical movement of goods and services? How are businesses adapting to those global supply chain disruptions we talked about?
It's a valid question.
Nearshoring is becoming more and more important. Bringing production closer to where the customers are, that makes businesses less reliant on those long, complicated, and frankly, vulnerable global supply chains. It also shrinks their carbon footprint and creates more localized, resilient operations. It's a win-win.
So it's about creating a business model that's more localized, more sustainable, and driven by technology. But can businesses even afford to make these changes? This all sounds really expensive to implement.
It's not just about the cost, it's about the value. Businesses that prioritize sustainability, they're not just doing their part for the planet, they're also boosting their reputation, they're attracting customers who care about these issues, and they're more likely to attract and keep top talent and investors. They're taking notice. They're putting their money where their values are, investing in companies that prioritize environmental, social, and governance factors, what they call ESG.
So sustainability isn't just good for the planet, it's good for business. It's about recognizing that the health of our planet and the health of our economy are totally intertwined. But speaking of interconnectedness, let's move on to our final elephant, the one that could potentially change everything. Intelligent advances.
Now we're talking.
We're talking about the crazy fast evolution of AI, automation, all things tech, basically. It's changing how we work, how we live, everything. And it's happening at warp speed. But before we get lost in the digital weeds, before we become slaves to the algorithm, maybe we should take a step back and ask ourselves, what does it mean to be human in a world where machines are getting smarter all the time?
That's a big question, and it's one we'll be diving into a lot more as we explore intelligent advances.
Sounds fascinating and maybe a little bit scary, to be honest. I'm excited, but I'm also a little terrified to see what the future holds. But hey, that's what makes life interesting, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we're back and ready to jump headfirst into intelligent advances. Where do we even begin? It feels like every day there's a new headline about AI doing something amazing, or maybe a little creepy, depending on how you look at it.
You're not wrong. It's a fast-moving world out there. But before we get swept up in all the hype, let's remember one crucial thing. Technology, at its core, is a tool. We get to decide how we use it.
I like that technology is a tool, but not everyone has access to the same tools, right? We've talked about inequality, and it seems like these intelligent advances, they could either help even the playing field or make things even more unequal. It all depends on how we play our cards.
That's a really important point. We can't talk about intelligent advances without acknowledging that these technologies could actually make existing inequalities even worse. We have to be careful, or we'll end up in a world where only a select few get to enjoy the benefits of AI and automation, while everyone else is left behind.
So how do we avoid that? How do we make sure these intelligent advances are actually a force for good for everyone, not just a select few?
It starts with being aware of the potential downsides. Take AI, for instance. These systems, they're only as good as the information we feed them. If that data reflects our own biases, guess what? Those biases get baked into the technology, and instead of fixing inequalities, they end up making them even worse.
Like that saying, garbage in, garbage out. Feed these AI systems bad data, you're going to get some pretty bad results.
Exactly. We have to be intentional about creating AI systems that are fair, transparent, and accountable. That means having diverse teams building these technologies, teams that reflect the diversity of the people they're supposed to be serving.
So diversity in tech isn't just some feel-good thing. It's about creating better, more equitable technology for everyone.
Exactly. And it's not just about AI either. We need to think about access to these technologies more broadly. How do we ensure that everyone, regardless of their background or where they live, has the chance to benefit from these advancements?
It's about creating a level playing field,
Yeah.
right? Not just in terms of who has access to the technology itself, but also who has the skills and knowledge to actually use it and thrive in this new world.
Absolutely. We have to invest in education and training programs that equip people with the digital literacy and critical thinking skills they need to navigate this increasingly complex world. It's about empowering people to be more than just passive users of technology. They need to be creators, innovators, active participants in shaping the future.
So it's about making sure these intelligent advances are available to everyone, that they're a tool for empowerment, not for leaving people behind.
Exactly. And that leads us to what might be the most important question of all. How will these technologies impact the future of work? We've all heard the predictions about robots taking our jobs. Is that really going to happen, or is there another way forward?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got these mind-blowing advances in automation, AI, robotics. On the other hand, you've got these very real fears about job losses and widening inequality. How do we reconcile these two things? Where do humans fit into this picture?
It's not about humans versus machines. It's about finding ways for humans and machines to work together effectively. We need to view these technologies not as replacements for humans, but as tools that can help us do things even better.
So it's about finding the sweet spot where humans, machines complement each other.
Exactly. Think about the healthcare industry, for example. AI is already being used to analyze medical images, diagnose diseases, even create personalized treatment plans. But that doesn't mean doctors and nurses are out of a job. If anything, these technologies free them up from doing tedious tasks, giving them more time to focus on patients, provide empathy, and make those crucial decisions that require human judgment and intuition.
It's about using AI to enhance human capabilities, not to push humans out of the picture.
Exactly. And this is happening across industries. In manufacturing, robots are taking over those dangerous, repetitive jobs, freeing up human workers for more creative, strategic roles. In finance, AI is being used to spot fraud and identify good investments, while financial analysts can focus on providing personalized advice and building relationships with clients.
So the future of work is less about humans doing the work and more about humans managing, interpreting, and adding value to the work that machines are doing.
You got it. And this requires a major shift in thinking, both for individuals and for organizations. We need to be open to lifelong learning, constantly adapting our skills and knowledge to keep up with the latest technological advancements. We need to develop those uniquely human qualities like creativity, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence.
So it's not just about learning how to code. It's about learning how to be more human, more adaptable, more resilient in the face of change. It's about facing the unknown with a sense of curiosity and courage.
Beautifully put. And it's about understanding that the future isn't some predetermined thing that's just going to happen to us. We're creating the future every single day through the choices we make and the actions we take, both as individuals and as a global community.
So the question isn't whether technology will keep advancing. The question is, what kind of future do we want to create with it? What values do we want to build into these technologies? How can we make sure these advancements benefit all of humanity, not just a select few?
Those are the questions we need to keep asking ourselves every step of the way.
It's exciting and a little overwhelming at the same time, isn't it? this power we have to shape the future with technology.
It definitely is, but it's also an incredible opportunity. We're living in a time of unprecedented technological advancement. The possibilities are endless. It's up to us to make sure those possibilities lead to a more just, equitable, and sustainable world for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of ethics, the changing relationship between humans and machines, and the need for a mindset shift. But let's get practical for a moment. What are some concrete things businesses? It's about understanding that your employees are your most valuable asset, not just for the skills they have now, but for their potential to learn, adapt, and grow right alongside these technological advancements.
Precisely. And finally, never ever underestimate the importance of ethics and responsibility. As you explore and implement these intelligent advances, always make sure you're doing it in a way that aligns with your values and contributes to a better world.
So it's not just about what we can do with technology, but what we should do with it.
Exactly. We have to be mindful of the potential consequences of our actions, both good and bad, and make choices that benefit not just ourselves, but also our communities and our planet.
It's about remembering that technology is a double-edged sword, right? It could be used for good or for evil. It's up to us to make sure we're using it wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that in mind, I think it's time to move on to the final part of our discussion. We've spent some time getting to know each elephant individually. Now let's take a step back and see how it all fits together.
Time to connect the dots, right? To see how these trends, which might seem totally separate at first glance, are actually intertwined, how they influence and amplify each other, and what it all means for the future.
Exactly. Get ready, because this is where things get really interesting. Welcome back for the grand finale, the final part of our deep dive into these 7 gray elephants.
It's been quite the journey. We've explored each of these massive trends, but now it's time to zoom out and see how they all fit together, right? Time to see the whole elephant, not just the individual parts.
Precisely. Just like in that parable we talked about earlier, focusing on just one part means missing the bigger picture. These trends aren't happening in isolation. They're all intertwined, influencing each other in really fascinating ways.
Yeah, it's like a giant complex ecosystem, right? Each element impacts the others, creating this ripple effect throughout the entire system.
Exactly. And if we want to navigate the future effectively, understanding these connections is crucial. So, ready to connect the dots.
I'm game if you are. Let's do it. Where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, let's think back. We talked about angry people, remember? Fueled by economic anxieties, social injustices, that feeling of being unheard. And then there's inequality, that ever-widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. It seems to me those two elephants often go hand in hand, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There's a definite connection between rising inequality and social unrest. When people feel like the system is stacked against them, like that gap is just getting wider and wider, it's a recipe for resentment, frustration, and, yeah, anger. And we see that manifest in protests, social movements, even political instability.
Right. And all that anger, that sense of unfairness, it spills over into the business world, too. Think about those boycotts we see, social media campaigns targeting companies, even employees speaking out against their own employers.
Yeah, businesses that ignore those societal undercurrents, they're doing so at their own peril. It's not enough to just talk about social responsibility. Companies need to take concrete steps to actually address inequality, both within their own walls and in the wider world.
Couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that businesses play a huge role in creating a just and equitable society. It's not just about those profits anymore.
Exactly. And this ties into the aging population's elephant as well.
Yeah.
As populations get older and birth rates go down, those social safety nets, pensions, healthcare, they're going to be under more and more strain. And if those systems are already weakened by inequality, the consequences can be much, much worse.
Absolutely. We're looking at potential economic stagnation, a shrinking workforce, and a huge burden on younger generations to support an aging population. Definitely a recipe for potential conflict between generations.
Doesn't sound great, does it?
It doesn't. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be that way. If we tackle inequality, NOW, if we create a more just and equitable society today, we can lessen those risks and build a future where everyone has a real shot at a good life, no matter how old they are.
So it's about building a world where everyone can age with dignity, with security, knowing they'll be taken care of, not left behind.
Exactly. And that's where the angry planet comes into play. Climate change is like a pressure cooker, making those existing inequalities even worse and fueling even more social unrest.
We're already seeing it happen all over the world. Droughts, extreme weather events, They hit poorer communities the hardest, leading to food shortages, displacement, conflict.
Exactly. And all those climate-induced crises, they can lead to mass migrations, putting even more strain on already limited resources and escalating tensions in regions that are already on edge.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Hmm.
Climate change just throws fuel on the fire of social, economic, and political instability. And this is where multipolarity adds another layer of complexity to the mix, doesn't it?
You got it. As climate change intensifies, resources are going to become more scarce. Competition for those resources is bound to heat up, potentially leading to conflict between nations, especially those that are already dealing with geopolitical tension.
We're talking potential water wars, conflicts over land, maybe even disputes over who gets access to clean energy sources. It's pretty scary stuff.
It's definitely something to be concerned about, but it also underscores the critical need for global cooperation. Instead of fighting over dwindling resources, countries need to find ways to work together to share knowledge and technology to collectively address this global challenge.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, that we're all connected. What happens in one part of the world affects us all, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely. And that brings us full circle back to intelligent advances. These incredible technological leaps forward, while holding so much potential for good, can also make those existing inequalities even worse if we're not extremely careful about how we develop and use them.
We've already talked about algorithmic bias, how AI systems can actually reinforce and even amplify societal biases that are already there.
Right. And if we're not careful, AI could actually end up widening that gap between the haves and the have-nots, creating a world where only a select few get to reap the benefits of technology, leaving everyone else in the dust.
So how do we make sure that AI serves humanity, not the other way around? That it helps bridge that gap between the haves and the have-nots instead of making it wider?
It's about baking those ethical considerations into every single stage of AI development, from the data we use to train those systems to the algorithms that drive their decisions. We need diverse representation in the tech industry so that the people creating these technologies reflect the people they're being designed for.
So it's not just about what we can do with AI, it's about what we should do with it.
Exactly. We need to be super aware of the potential consequences of our actions, both good and bad, and make choices that don't just benefit our bottom line, but also our communities and our planet. It's a balancing act for sure.
It's about remembering that technology is a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil. It's up to us to use it wisely.
Couldn't have put it better myself. It's about making sure that AI is a force for good, for equality, for progress. It's a team effort, though. Governments, businesses, researchers, everyday people, we all have to work together to steer AI in a direction that benefits everyone.
It's a tall order, no doubt, but it's too important to ignore. So here we are, facing these 7 gray elephants, these massive forces shaping our world. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, even powerless. But we're not powerless, are we? What can we do as individuals and as a global community to face these challenges head-on and create a better future?
It's definitely easy to feel overwhelmed, but we can't let fear stop us from taking action. The good news is we're not starting from scratch. We've got the knowledge, the tools, the resources to tackle these challenges. And most importantly, we got each other.
So where do we go from here? What's the first step?
The first step is understanding that we're not alone in this. These challenges are too big, too complex for any single person, organization, or even country to solve on their own. We have to work together, break down those walls separating us, and find solutions as a team.
Collaboration seems to be a running theme throughout all of this, doesn't it? It's about recognizing that we're all connected by the challenges we face and connected by the solutions we need to find.
Exactly. We have to start seeing ourselves as part of a global community, united by our shared humanity and our shared responsibility for the future of this planet.
It's about shifting from me to we, from focusing on individual gain to focusing on the well-being of everyone.
You got it. And that shift in mindset is crucial, not just for dealing with these huge global challenges, but also for navigating our own personal and professional lives.
It's about cultivating empathy, showing compassion, and feeling a deep sense of interconnectedness with every living thing on this planet. It's about realizing that our actions have a ripple effect, and that even the smallest acts of kindness, courage, and creativity can have a huge impact.
Beautifully said. Isn't that what it's all about, really? Leaving the world a little bit better than we found it.
I think so. As we wrap up this incredible deep dive into the 7 gray elephants, I'm filled with a sense of hope. The challenges are real, yes, but so is our ability to innovate, to adapt, and to come together to create positive change.
Couldn't agree more. The future isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating together, each and every day, through our choices and our actions.
So let's choose wisely, let's act with courage, and let's create a future that we can all be proud of.
I'll raise a glass to that. And on that note, thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop asking those big, important questions.
And remember, the future is not something to be afraid of, it's something to embrace. Let's go create it together.